welcome back to Surviving and Thriving, the Black Experience, where we celebrate the voices, the truth, and journeys that shape our community. Today's guest is someone who holds a special place in both academic and my personal journey. Meghan L. Green. Hi, Meghan.
Hi, Candace Renee.
Hey. Meghan is an assistant professor of early childhood teacher education at Erickson Institute in Chicago, Illinois. A whole mouthful. As an educator and art-based researcher, she provides passion, depth, and creativity in every space she enters. Her work uses multiple modes of expression, storytelling, art, and reflection to explore her lived experience as a Black queer woman, helping others see the power of embracing their full identity. What makes this moment especially meaningful for me is that Meghan was my professor during my time at Erickson Early Childhood Triple Endorsement Master's Program, a whole mouthful again, where I completed my second master's degree. Having her here today is more than an honor. It's a full circle moment that reflects the deep impact educators can have when they lead authentically and with purpose. I am incredibly grateful, even though I'm having all these bloopers. I am so grateful and so fangirling over here that Meghan is here to join us, share her insight, her journey, as well as her transformative work. So, hi, Meghan.
Hello.
I am so happy that you are here, as you already know. And audience, I am so excited that she is here. She is absolutely amazing. So I want to go ahead and start this conversation in regards to what were your thoughts in regards to the content that I've been making so far? What feelings has it resonated and what impact?
So I'm entering, and it's scary to think about it, but I think I'm going on year 20 within like my professional spaces. And so I think the first thing that I felt was almost this pride of, oh my gosh, we're having this conversation, right? Around how do we connect historical knowledge with what we see happening in our professional spaces now. So there's this feeling of solidarity in, oh, you're not the only one. You were never the only one, right?
Mhm.
There's also probably a little bit of frustration that we're still, right, seeing some of the same things. Here we are in mid 2025,
Mhm.
and we're still having to have the same conversation to kind of prepare young folks who are entering into the workplace for what they're going to encounter. And I think part of what is helpful with your series is that the focus isn't, so it kind of shifts away from what Toni Morrison says is like the white gaze. So we're not talking about what folks are going to encounter from other races and ethnicities, right?
Right.
It's more of like this internal conversation.
Yes.
So it's almost like a calling in rather than like a calling out. So it was both this kind of pride, solidarity feeling, but also this, man, we're still here. Like we are still dealing with some of these same things.
Mhm. Question. So when you say that we're still dealing with this, like, can you tell me a little bit more in depth in regards to like what you mean of like what we're dealing with? That's like similar to what we've had. I call it the concept of ain't nothing new under the sun. So like yeah. Can you express that just a little bit more?
Yeah. I think some of those same themes around what does it feel like when you enter a space, and you're maybe the only person, right, with your racial or ethnic background. What does it feel like to kind of hold all of those things as you want to make sure that you're doing a good job. That's why you're in, whatever the role is in the first place.
Yep.
But also, you want to make sure that you're bringing yourself in fully, right? And so this
Absolutely.
idea that we still haven't gotten to a place
Mhm.
where this sense of belonging is
Mhm.
real for folks.
Mhm.
And it's not just something, that companies put on their website so that you put in the HR material, right? But
Mhm.
that where folks actually feel like they belong. And so feeling like we're still trying to reach that place where we have like the true sense of belonging.
Okay. So you talked about belonging, and I'm going to kind of switch it in regards to like representation. So
Mhm.
like, how do you belong within a space? So tell me in in your own words what you think the burden of representation means, or what does it
Mm,
like to symbolize?
right. I feel like the burden of representation is something that I think about both externally and internally, right? So externally from the standpoint of what does it mean for me to kind of think about how um, people outside of my community see
Mm-hmm.
me, right? And the assumptions that they are making. So when they see me, are they also seeing maybe every other representation of a Black woman, right, that they've encountered, whether those experiences were positive or negative? And so I think that's kind of the external burden of kind of holding other people's assumptions of who
Mm-hmm.
you are, right? Without knowing you and your lived experiences. But I also think about the internal weight of having to carry folks in with you. So this phrase around like lifting as we climb, or, and I think it's always been associated with Black women in particular,
Mm-hmm.
this idea that when we go into spaces, um, some of that is like an internal pressure that we put on
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, right? Of making sure that you are representing your community, that you're representing your people, you're representing your folks,
Mm-hmm.
because you never just enter with you. Right? You enter
Mm-hmm.
with all of those past lived experiences, um, and you're also then representing people's future expectations for whoever, whatever Black woman they encounter after you, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
associate with you.
Mm-hmm. So you talk about it, in regards to a whole. Can you tell me like a specific burden that you feel yourself that you've had to carry?
Mhm. So I was looking at this, reading this article within the Chronicle of Higher Education, and so it was given stats on. Well, I'll back up a little bit. So, my background is in early childhood education. I was an early childhood teacher for about 15 years or so before making the transition into higher education. And so, I think it was interesting going from a space where I was going from a field that is mostly women of color, right, with early childhood education, into um, as a tenure track faculty member for the stats in the article, only 4% of Black women hold my title of assistant professor. As you kind of go up in the ranks, right, as folks are getting promotions, that number goes down to where there are only 2% of Black women who hold full professorships. And so I think that has really hit me really hard as I enter my third year in this role, just knowing that 4% is tiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I am currently in a space where there is no other Black woman who holds my title of assistant professor in my place of employment.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that that's not like rare, that's actually the norm in
Mm-hmm.
this field. So I think the burden that I hold right now is both around being a Black woman and then thinking like a little bit, if we narrow down a little bit, being a queer Black woman, I'm for sure one of only in spaces that I enter.
When did you first become aware that you were being seen as more than just yourself, and that you were representing the race?
Mhm. I think it became clear for me when there were certain like institutional asks, right? And I started to notice the pattern that my peers or my colleagues weren't necessarily being asked to do things like media appearances or, oh, we have this idea around this blog and we'd love for you to, to lend your voice. And I think on one hand, representation is used as, we just just really love what you have to say, and we just want to provide you with the platform and the opportunity, right,
Mhm.
to express yourself. And as someone who's never shied away
Right.
from an opportunity to use my voice, I think at first it was was seeing it as an honor, right? Of, oh,
Yes.
okay, if they came to me, they asked me to do this thing. This is both a representation of the institution, but it's also, right, the larger representation of knowing the numbers that I just gave you around that 4%, right, of
Mhm.
especially as Black women as assistant professors, that
Mhm.
I'm representing a very small population right now.
Right.
Um, and if I don't take this opportunity, right? Does that mean that someone else then is going to try to speak to the experiences or try to
Mhm.
speak to whatever that situation is? And they're not going to have my lived experience, so they're not going to have the same lens, right?
Mhm.
So if I don't take that opportunity, what am I giving up? But also noticing the pattern of folks um, using the idea that they want to uplift your voice, right? Almost like they're doing you a favor by giving
Mhm.
you a platform
You took my
instead of
words from me. I
exploiting
was just
you.
gonna say. I literally wrote this down. No, but keep going. I'm sorry. I literally just put that. Oh, yep. Go ahead.
No, listen, that was it right there. That
Okay.
was like the resonating point of, oh, girl, they are not trying to uplift you. This is not about opportunity. This is not
Mhm.
about trying to put you on in a meaningful way. This
Mhm.
is really because they know that you represent certain social identities, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Especially in a space where still very white,
Mhm.
still very cisgender, heterosexual, male, all of that.
Mhm.
Um, and so they want to, it kind of aligns with, in one of your videos, you mentioned knowing your employer's mission, right? Knowing the ins and outs of who it is that you're working for. Um,
Mhm.
and so if you're in a space that says that they are upholding principles of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, then of course it's in their best interest, right?
Mhm.
To showcase that and bring you out
Yeah. Yep. So
when
look what
they
we
need
got.
to.
We got
Mhm.
this here where we're doing this. Just in fact, just another form of using the black body
Yes.
at that time, in the black spirit and the black mind at that point.
Mhm.
Not having the not having the wherewithal to understand that like we are more than just our bodies. We are not a commodity to be used for a different, what's the word I'm looking for us to not be used in that manner, to be used for a counter narrative reason, if that makes sense. And a lot of the times that's in fact what happens.
Mhm.
You talked about like what am I giving up or what would be given up for that within that space. I think about the concept of like how um when you if someone was to say no,
Mhm.
what are you missing out? Are you not going to be seen as safe anymore?
Mhm.
Are you not going to be seen as compliant? Are you
Yes.
not going to be seen as a team player?
Mhm. Mhm.
Those are the kind of things that we have to sit here and think about when we, in fact, say no to opportunities that seem like an opportunity, when in all actuality, it's not for the betterment of us, if that
Yes.
makes sense. Um, how do you navigate being the only one in the room? And do you feel it comes with an added responsibility?
Mm. So I think for a while, it was a lot of pressure. And I think the other social identity that I live with is being neurodivergent. And so there was like heightened anxiety before I would go into spaces or do things because there was this pressure around being perfect, right? I
Mhm.
feel like I spent most of my adolescence trying to work my way out in like young adulthood, right? Of trying to work out of this feeling of having to be perfect, and
Mhm.
having to kind of take all of that on. So now at the ripe old age of 40, I think one of the things that I learned was that I was in rooms for a reason. And it wasn't always the reason that I thought, right? It wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily the original intent.
Mhm.
So even when I was presented with opportunities to do certain things, and whether that was by my employer, right, or just happenstance of being able to engage in certain activities. It wasn't until after I left those spaces, and maybe it was somebody sent me a direct message right on social media. Maybe it was someone stopped me in the hallway at a conference to just say, listen, I was just in the space that you were in, and I heard what you said, or just you sharing in your bio, right, who you are, that kind of resonated with me. Because I don't necessarily hear folks who share those identities very often.
Mhm.
And I'm just really happy that you were in that space. And I
Mhm.
think that kind of provides the affirmation of, oh, okay, this is bigger than simply you doing whatever the task is at hand, right?
Mhm.
Representation, I think that's the both and of representation.
Mhm.
So I do think that it's most definitely a burden and something that we hold. I also think it's something that can affirm us in ways when we understand that it's bigger than us as individuals.
Mhm. You were talking about affirmations, and so I remember when I got to see you at NACY and how
Mhm.
excited I was. But I absolutely remember the activity. Well, I don't remember the actual title of the seminar I walked into. I do remember a big piece in regards to affirmations and the importance of affirmations and understanding. And so for example, how I'll tie this together is that while going through that, it almost was like a tearjerker for me, having to understand like it's okay to be the only one within that space, but why am I the only one within this space?
Mm.
That's a question that you have to ask. I also put in regards to like my previous videos that I've made as well too is learning. So when you are that only one within that space, what are you doing with your time while you're within that space? Are you learning? My biggest thing in regards to my entire series is I will get an entrepreneur out of this and myself being one as
Yeah.
well, because you have to be able to sit here and learn these systems. I feel like God does not put you in a space for no reason. And a lot of the times based upon emotionality, not to go on a tangent, but a lot of the times based upon emotionality and things as such, we don't take the time to learn the systems. And these systems don't have race to them. So you have to learn them regardless.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna tie this back in regards to that affirmation piece as well, too. I truly felt affirmed and feel affirmed when I'm in specific spaces only because I've taken the time to take heed to wisdom. And I've taken time to sit here and understand why I'm within this space. I might not know it right then and there, but I'll
Mhm.
learn it after time, after a certain amount of time. So I just want to go ahead and make mention to that because I do understand the pressure that you're talking about. And
Mhm.
I've lived it, as you know. I've experienced that anxiety, and I am pretty sure I would say we're gonna do a 98.5% because we can't do 100, but we're gonna say 98.5% of my audience has experienced this where they're within a space and wondering why you have this invisible pressure. Because
Mm.
what they say, pressure makes diamonds, right? But
Mm.
pressure also creates dynamite as well. It also causes explosion as well too.
Right.
But I don't think we usually talk about that part of it. Um, so do you feel pressure to raise like exception because you're a mom? So do you feel pressure to raise exceptional children because of how society judges Black motherhood?
Mm. I think that my pressure, honestly, my pressure probably comes internally.
Okay.
And this is something that you mentioned in my bio that I'm an arts-based person, a storyteller, a poet. And I think the internal examples that I have had for motherhood, so with my mom, my grandmother, great grandmother, right, aunts, cousins, all of those were my examples. And so those were always, I think, the what I measured myself by and what I was trying to live up to. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some generational things that we trying to unlearn.
Right.
right? Because we always want to make things better for that next generation. So I think some of the lessons that I have learned as a mother came from things that maybe I didn't want to repeat,
Mhm.
right? From some things that I witnessed or experienced.
Yes.
When I think about this idea of raising exceptional children, so I have two sons, right? So I think
Mhm.
it falls heavy on me because there is a certain something of raising two Black boys
Yes.
in this world, right? And so I think this ties to that idea of affirmations. So that was something that I did with them. And it also goes into the early childhood background, right? Of seeing children as being competent and brilliant, and
Mhm.
really believing in the brilliance of children, believing specifically in the brilliance of Black children,
Mhm.
right? Um, the pressure that I put on myself was to make sure that they could see examples in the world that they were proud of, right? And so whether that was through like my own work ethic and how I moved in the world, um, but also in how they kind of got to experience the world and how I engaged with them. So last fall, for example, they got to do something that I probably would have been absolutely terrified to do. So even though I put them on the spot and kind of, put them in this opportunity, again, it kind of one of those opportunity things, but in this case, I guess I was the institution presenting the opportunity to them. So
Mhm.
they got to present at a plenary panel at this international early childhood conference at the
Awesome.
Reconceptualizing Early Childhood Education. And that was just I was just so proud of them to be able to speak in front of a room full of people
Mhm.
about what does Black joy look like for them? How do they experience Black joy both within school spaces and outside of school spaces, and for them
Mhm.
to be able to say their truth, right? Because I think there was a point in that presentation where my youngest son, who took the mic and kind of ran with it,
Mhm.
was like, you know what? Honestly, school sometimes isn't a joyful place for me. The joy that I get though is in the relationships that I have with my friends because they allow me to just be myself. And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
that's dope. Oh, good
That's
for
truth. I'm gonna
you.
say, clock it. Clock
Listen,
it.
listen. So I think that the pressure, again, like I said, the pressure probably comes from family examples.
Mhm.
I think on paper, there are a lot of ways that I look like a statistic on paper, right? I am
Mhm.
a Black single mother who was raised by a Black single mother.
Mhm.
Um, I was young-ish. I was still, like early mid-20s.
Mhm.
So youngish when we talk about that. But there's so many ways that if someone were to simply see my story on paper and look at it from like this statistic standpoint,
Mhm.
I should have been set up to fail, right?
Right.
My children should not actually be these folks who are able to go to international conferences and sit on stages like that.
Mhm.
But I think there's beauty in the affirmation piece of being told from a very young age how brilliant you are and that
Mhm.
there is nothing that you're not trying to. I never raised them, I don't think, to push up against to try to defy a stereotype. I think it
Mhm.
was one thing to make them aware
Mhm.
of the views that the world would have of them as Black boys, but I never made the connection for them of, okay, and so you have to do this, this, and this to kind of defy that stereotype.
Mhm.
The goal for us was always them reaching towards excellence, period.
Mhm.
Right. And I think that was the example that was also set for me by the Black mothers in my life of the goal is just always going to be you reaching for excellence regardless.
Mhm. I respect you so much for not for not being a mother that just glosses over the differences that are made with Black boys.
Mm,
That can be a whole nother series within itself.
listen.
But I just appreciate you for allowing them to show up within being their authentic self, them choosing to be their authentic self.
Mhm,
Because think about it, you have young men, they might be like, oh, mama, like I don't want to go to this school thing. Like I want to talk to these grown people. Like I want to go be with my friends. But like, no, they took the time to sit here and say, hey, this is what Black joy looks like for us.
mhm,
We usually happy, but guess what? There are some moments that we not happy about.
right.
And like you just said, like they said, the relationships that they make is what humbles them or what keeps them in tune with their own joy that they have. And I
Mhm,
think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that goes to show how amazing of a mother you are with these Black boys because people don't understand it's it's different for our Black boys. It's different for us as Black women, but it is truly different. And we see the data and things of such in regards to the likelihoods of our Black men and or young Black boys succeeding. So
mhm.
the fact that you have boys that are within those spaces and you keep them there, kudos to you. Kudos to you. Keep doing that, Megan. Keep them in those spaces.
Thank you.
I'm about to say, I hope to see them on a panel. I'm about to say at NACI somewhere or somewhere else during some I'll be there. Okay, so how do you model for your students and or your own children
Mhm.
what it means to be fully human and not to just be a symbol of strength?
Yeah. I think this goes back to what I was talking about in terms of a sense of belonging, not just being something that we say, right? But what
Yep.
we live. And so my the path for me has always been I just got to model it, right? I
Hmm.
think it comes from the background of being an educator. Um, I can show you better than I can tell you. So whether it's my students or whether it's with my boys as my children, this idea of I'm going to show up fully. And I think that that creates the space for other folks feel that, right? When
Hmm.
they witness you. So there's this idea that I've been sitting with based on the work of Fakile Nomalo, another early childhood scholar. Um, and it's this concept of testifying and witnessing,
Hmm.
right? So I think my testimony has just been to show up as myself. I'm very vocal. I think that there's something to be said around naming things, right? So I don't shy away from simply saying who I am. So it's
Hmm.
why it's important for me to introduce myself as I am a Black queer mother, right? I am a poet. And I bring all of that history in with me wherever it is that I go,
Hmm.
whether that is working in a classroom with 4-year-olds, whether it's at home with my teenagers, whether it's in a classroom in a graduate school setting. So I think creating that space of bringing myself in authentically is really just about being vulnerable.
Hmm.
Because if I'm going to ask other people to kind of be transparent and to
Hmm.
share parts of themselves, and I like to get deep, and I like
Hmm.
for other folks to get deep because I
Hmm.
think that's the only way that we really make the connections and learn each other when we kind of take the mask off.
Hmm.
And sometimes that can be us rolling the dice,
Hmm.
right? Because there has to be the realization every time that I ask somebody to share some truth, some personal truth, some really close truth
Hmm.
about themselves. Um, I know that I'm asking them to engage in a certain amount of risky behavior, right?
Hmm.
Because as your series has pointed out, it has not always been safe, and it still isn't safe for us to show up as ourselves, right? There are all
Hmm.
these ways in which how we show up gets policed, how we get surveilled, even outside of our professional workspaces. Now we get surveilled on social media platforms like LinkedIn, right? Folks gotta watch what you post because folks are going to take something and they're going to read into it, right? But
Hmm.
I think that the best way for me to ask other people around me to show up authentically and to show up fully has been to do that myself. Understanding that there is a certain amount of risk that I'm taking, having thought about, right, what could be the consequences of showing up authentically, what could be the consequence of saying the thing that kind of pushes or rubs against, right, an administrator or a leader's agenda.
Mhm.
But knowing that at the end of the day, I have to live with myself.
Mhm.
And so if I don't feel comfortable uh, with who I am
Mhm.
in a space, then playing the game for the sake of playing the game, I don't think does anything for our spirits. Because I think that was the other part of what I have learned, particularly over the last 3 years in higher education, has been taking note of the emotional and the spiritual toll
Mhm.
that, being, because we're talking about this burden of representation. So really taking note of not just physically, what does that do to you, right? But emotionally, spiritually,
Mhm.
um, what are you holding? And then how do you replenish yourself
Mhm.
if you are kind of losing a little bit, you know?
Mhm. So you kind of were mentioning and talking about like playing the game. And so
Mhm.
I want to ask you, so it kind of ties into this, but how do you protect your children from internalizing the same burden that you carry while still preparing them for the realities of their race in America?
Yeah, yeah. I think that I've always been honest with the boys. And I didn't quite know if that was paying off or if they were gonna wake up one day and say, "Oh my gosh, you traumatized it's us, 'cause like I shared with you all in class, right? I always include, because it's another thing within my courses, I include these bits of my life, because I ask my students to do the same. Of that,
Mhm.
it's my whole research agenda that who we are, your lived experiences impacts how you show up in a classroom, right? How
Mhm.
you engage with young children and families. And so I believe the same is true as a teacher educator, but there's a particular story that I always share with students around taking the boys to like their first anti-white supremacy protest. And I used to wonder, oh my gosh, are they gonna tell me when they're older that they were traumatized by having to go to this protest? But there are times when I've witnessed their activism and
Mhm.
their own propensity towards justice and how they think about justice in the world, especially as teenagers right now who they could just be thinking about, trying to get on the PS5. And
Mm.
not saying that they don't, they do.
Right.
They enjoy that too, because we gotta have, you gotta be balanced. That's part of
Mhm.
being whole. But it's been reassuring for me to see how they advocate for,
Mhm.
let's say, their friends, right? How they advocate for me or people, the other loved ones in their lives. And I think one of my biggest protective factors has been recognizing that I've got to do a balance. There has to be a balance of providing the truth and providing this is the reality of the world, right? Especially as it relates to your race, your gender identity.
Mhm.
Um, as it relates even to the ways in which you would have to stand up for me, let's say, based on my sexual identity as a queer person, which they've had to do.
Mhm.
Um, but the balance is provide the truth, but I'm also gonna always be there to affirm, to pour in,
Mhm.
to protect, right? I think that they know that I have their back in
Mhm.
things. So we've had a couple of situations, let's say in school, where they've gotten a little bit of trouble maybe for having, a bit of their mama in them of speaking up.
That
Uh,
affirming.
you know, listen, listen. And so knowing that I'm going to be there, I'm gonna hold them accountable because, hey, you're in a school space. I also taught you to respect your elders.
Right.
So don't go in there doing anything too off the wall. But also, I do want you to advocate for what you feel is right,
Right.
right? And because of my own, the philosophy that I have around trusting children, believing children, really wanting to pour in um,
Mhm.
children, I think that that's been helpful for me as a guiding principle.
Okay. So you talk about trusting children. So I want to keep it there because I do have a
Mhm.
question, but we have ran out of time for this particular episode. So I would like to invite you to continue to share and dialogue and answer a few more questions. So are you available to do so?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Well, everyone, this is Megan L. Green, and from Surviving and Thriving the Black Experience, we will be back. So stay tuned. Bye, everyone.